Hello, everyone. Welcome to our latest design journal. This is design journal number 18, if you can believe it. I'm very excited to be here tonight. Looking forward to talking with everyone and chatting about what we've been doing. And we've had a lot of stuff going on since I've gotten back. As you guys know, I was gone all last week. I actually took some time off. So, actually stepped back to spend a little time with my family. But now I am back and back in action. So let me start out with my what's been going on recently, including our mail call. First off, very, very light action figure mail call this week. The only thing I can say is you're in command now, Admiral Piet. So yes, I have my Admiral Piet action figure, different from the Captain Piet action figure, probably because of the number of throat lozenges on his shirt there. So got my Admiral Piet action figure in the mail. But more gaming related, I have a couple of things. First are I'm going to share my loot from Prime Day. So if anyone is keeping track of Prime Day, there are a lot of games on sale. A couple of things that I wanted to try for a while, one of which is Bedlam in Neverwinter. Is it awesome? Is it fun? I have no idea. I haven't even opened it yet, but it looks very cool. It's got a little map with miniatures. So they had me at map with miniatures on the back. So we'll see how it is. Was pretty cheap on Prime Day. So we'll find out if that's fun. Another one that I picked up on Prime Day that I've wanted for a super long time. And great deal was Formula D. Formula Day is the other one. I think the original was called in German, possibly. Anyway, this is one of the coolest racing games ever. I love this racing game. I love the drift mechanics on the corners and everything. Super, super cool game. And I'm so excited to finally have a copy of it. So it's been years since I played it. Hopefully it stands up to my memory of how awesome it was. So we'll see about that. Now on the role-playing game front, very excited about this. I got my Pendragon starter set in the mail. This is the new starter set from Chaosium. Super cool. Now, I have to say I have a place in my heart for Chaosium, partly because they're literally like down the street from me here in Ann Arbor area. But very excited to try Pendragon because I've always wanted to play this. I was like totally taken by it when it came out years and years and years ago. Seemed like it would be a really fun game because I love Arthurian legend. So I'm really geeked to try this out and give it a shot and see how it is. When I play these games, I'll let you guys know. We still haven't finished our Warhammer Fantasy role-playing starter set adventure, so I don't have anything new to tell you there. And we haven't started our Simbaroom, if I pronounce it correctly, adventure, but I'll let you know. The other thing that we've been doing is we've been doing a fair amount of cool name play testing, so let's maybe get to some of that. So talking about our cool name RPG stuff, the things that I've got going on right now is I've gotten some amazing feedback from some of our consulting designers. We have feedback from Crystal Mazur. We have feedback from Toya Finley. We've got feedback from Eloy Listanto. We got feedback from Stephen Long. Great stuff across the board. And here's the thing I've discovered. Everyone's feedback is completely different. If I were just trying to figure out what to do next based on taking the most common feedback that I received, I would not know what to do next because everyone had completely different feedback, which this isn't at all surprising, right? This is part of why I wanted such a diverse group of folks giving us feedback, because I wanted to hear a lot of different ideas about how we can build this game. Now, at the end of the day, they're all professionals, and so they're able to give us good underlying concept type of feedback that we're going to be able to use no matter what direction we go. But what's fascinating is, for example, the added up mechanic. From one end, we have the holy cow, this is awesome, I love it, to a yeah, this is pretty cool in the middle, to I really do not like this on the other end, right? So we have this gamut of feedback on this. It's just really fascinating. And so what I want to do is talk to you guys a little bit about the specifics of what I got. So, one of the things that I don't do is I'm not going to share quoting word for word the feedback I got, partly because one of the things that I promised our consulting designers is that they wouldn't have to get stressed out about whether they wrote it in a way that looked good and all the grammar was right. I just wanted to give them to give me raw feedback. So I'm just going to sort of paraphrase some of what came in here. Now, We did. I'm very excited that one of the things that I got some feedback on. I actually heard this a few times, even if the person didn't really love the system as a whole, was that they did really like this concept of adding up the two sides. Right? It was pretty cool. It was really easy. Now, one thing that came up, and I thought this was fascinating, was why are you adding on both sides? Seemed obvious to me. Good things on one thing, bad on the other. They go, yeah, but why don't you just add and subtract everything just from the damage, and then you never have to look up a new action score? Well, it seemed like amazingly obvious to me. On the other hand, I kind of like being able to roll different dice, but maybe that's the real answer. We'll find out. Now, granted, one thing I did find out is that we need to start the play testing, which is what I'll get to in a little bit here. But yeah, was one idea was, yeah, why don't you just add everything on one side? And I do like it. The thing I also like, though, is I do like the idea, and this is actually something that people have noted as a possible problem, but I like the idea of the storytelling engagement element of the GM saying, here's everything working against you, and the player saying, here's everything I've got that I think is going to help me to succeed, right? To be taking actions to ensure that they have the best possible benefit, right? We've talked about this mod hunting idea. And while there was some worry about mod hunting, especially among folks who have played with players who have been very focused on leveraging the mechanics of the system to their best ability, there's concern that it would end up being overblown, that they'd be constantly looking for every single little modifier they can get. On the other hand, there was a concern from another designer that if we were to limit people from finding cool modifiers to their role, that they would actually feel sort of like taking some of the story out of their hands, taking away some of their agency. They suggested that, look, it's fun for the character to get into this, for the player to get into it and say, I'm going to grab some sand and make sure that I toss it on across the table, and I'm going to slide across the table to the other side, and the sand will hopefully make it easier for me to slide. Whatever crazy thing they come up with. On one hand, there was the idea that, well, this is going to be abusive, and you're going to waste your time with people trying to find every mod. And on the other hand, we had people saying, this is awesome because it's going to help people to get into the story. So this is something that I'm very excited to see how it plays out at your tables, how it plays out in your read, your own thought from your own games, what you've seen happen. I think this is really a fascinating point that we're going to have to find out. So the whole idea of the modifiers to your action score are going to be really important to figure out. And so again, we had very mixed feedback on that. And I think that we're only going to know once we try it. Now, we've been trying it. It hasn't been an issue, but then again, we've been conscious about not wanting it to be an issue. So, it's a little hard for us to be objective in that respect as we're going through it. So now let me take a look at some of the other things I wanted to hear. So one thing that came up, we talked a little bit about core mechanics, and what you're going to find is in the playtest document that I'm putting together, I'm calling it the core rules. Now, as opposed to the basic rules. We have decided as a group, on all of the conversations and the surveys, that we want to have a core rule set that represents the game. And then instead of an advanced set, which sounds like better than or the next level, right? Instead of advanced, we're just going to have rules modules that you can add onto the game to tweak it to your style and your taste. Now, one of the things that we've long thought about was this idea of the core rules being simpler, and that the rules modulars make things more complicated. Well, one of the pieces of feedback that came up that I really loved was this idea that, what if you went the other way? What if instead of saying you have these 3 body, mind, spirit base attributes, you say you have these 9 base attributes, and narrowing it down to 3 represents a rule module? And it sort of struck me that we were still sort of locked in this thinking of basic and advanced, right? Where basic was simpler and advanced was more complicated, but it doesn't have to be that way. The rules modules could actually simplify the game for folks who want that style of play. And maybe for the core rules, we don't want it to be the simplest possible game. We want it to be the sort of baseline game where you can either simplify it or add complexity. And that struck me as such an interesting thought. Again, this is why I love having different points of view on this, because you sit here and you think about this over and over and over, and you mull it over and you read it and you write more about it. And it's easy to just get locked into this sphere of thought without going beyond it. And it's only when you bring other people in that you start to go, well, yeah, that makes perfect sense. So that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about as we roll out the play test. We're going to be looking to you guys to say, like, yeah, why don't we just do all 9 attributes up front? Why are we only doing 5 or 3, right? As we go through it. So I think that that's something that'll be very cool. I did get a couple of comments from folks very happy about the amount of math that we did going into this. It really struck me that every one of these professionals noted how important it was to have done that thinking, to have looked at it. So for you, if you're out there making your own game, and even if it feels like, yeah, it's as long as it kind of works, that might be true. But at least according to our professionals, taking the time to do the math, to understand what your odds are, to understand what the odds feel like, all of this is super, super important in their eyes in designing a really great game. So I wanted to pass that along to everyone so you guys can all give that some thought as we're going along with it here. Let me go ahead and look through some of my other notes that I had for it. I've got tons of great notes, right? So I want to share some of these with you. Let me just look here. So one of the things that came up was concern about the table. So as you guys know, the way the system is set up is that you add up your scores and it shows you what dice to roll on this little chart. A few times now, it's come up that the chart is dangerous and that it could slow the game down and that it's going to pull people away from the action because they're going to be looking at numbers. I need to see this at this point. I need to see it played out. I need to see how it works at your tables, because I'm not confident that that's the case, even if it's coming from folks I really, really trust. So I even feel bad kind of saying it because they know a lot and they're really good at what they do. At the same time, I still kind of feel like it's going to work. And I feel like, at least in our testing, it's worked pretty well. So that's one of the things that I'm going to need to know as well, is going to that table, looking up those dice. Is that slowing you down? Is that breaking the game for you? Is that taking you out of the adventure and out of the action? That's something that has come up again and again and again, is something that, some people are really nervous about. And so that's going to be one of the things we're going to want to focus on, especially when we pull out the survey and we say, hey, did you find the table distracting? Did it slow your game down? Did it stop you? Those sorts of things as we're going along. Now, another thing that has come up are some challenges around what average power levels will be. There is a little bit of concern that came up around the scale that we're looking at, right? So we talked about keeping the basic abilities like down to like 1 to 5 area for humans, but that gives us a pretty small scale. Now, arguably, D&D's got a pretty small scale. It just looks bigger because they divide everything by 2, and basically it's, every 2 points gives you a modifier. So why do you even have the original stat in the first place? I don't know. From that perspective, their scale is smaller than it appears as well. But the question is will the appearance of that small scale make people feel hampered or unrealistic about their game and not give enough breadth and depth in terms of how far your character can move on that scale, for attributes especially? Skills are another thing altogether, but attributes especially, right? All right, let me pull up some of my other notes here. Let's see. Mod hunting came up. Yeah. And then player facing roles. Now, this is something that there are people who love this and there are people who hate it. This is what I'm finding, is that, more of our consulting designers disliked the idea of purely player facing roles and liked it. They weren't against it in some cases, but no one was just like, yeah, I love it, right? It's the best way to do it. There really was this sense that you take a little bit of let me give some of the examples that were pointed out. One of them was that you are guilty until proven innocent in the court of combat. In other words, whenever an orc or someone attacks you, you have to make a roll. If you fail the roll, you get hit. You're going to get hit unless you make the roll. It's almost like the monster is already hit. Now, maybe we're getting a little bit Schrodinger in this, as far as is a cat alive or dead? But the reality was this feeling that you've already been hit unless you roll. And that seemed wrong to some of our consulting designers. There also is the idea that it doesn't feel like the NPC is acting if you're not rolling, which is an interesting thought and an interesting bit of psychology, right? If the GM's not rolling for the orc the same way you roll for your warrior, does it feel like the orc is really there? If you're just rolling to defend against a non-rolled attack, is that the same feel? That's something I think is interesting, and we're going to need to hear what you guys think about this, because that's certainly uh, a, a concern, right? I know that I, as a GM, love to roll the dice too. That's the other thing that keeps making me a little bit sad about player-facing rolling, is that I like to roll dice. And as the GM, it's fun to get my hands on some dice and see what I end up with. The other hand, I do really think this could work. So we're going to have to give this some testing. We're going to have to hear what you guys have to say when you go out there and start playing it, right? Let's see. So that was that. Sorry, guys, I'm trying to go through. I have a lot of information to go through, so I apologize for this. Yeah, I'm just noting the note here just about the idea of that the add-on modules could simplify, and I just love that idea. It's very cool. Definitely like the idea of a set of skills and sub-skills. That sounded very popular, especially the idea that you could have a more robust set of sub-skills down the road, so you could start simply. I like that idea, and we are probably going to be looking at, not probably, we are looking at that for the core rules right now, but we'll come back to that in a little bit. All right, so let me pull up one of my other comments. Let's see. Heath just said, and from Heath Geek First, which is an awesome YouTube channel, by the way. If you don't know Heath's channel, you should check it out. He does amazing stuff. He just was pointing out that it was interesting, the part about the orc being there. Let me go ahead and just share that comment really quick, because I think it's a, whoops, hide that one. Share the right comment. There we go. Yeah. Thinking about player-facing roles, a lot of people have been talking about that, and it's really an interesting thought to me, and I don't really know the truth about that. I don't know what it's really going to be like. I mean, so far we haven't run into problems with it, but I have missed rolling the dice, so I'm going to admit it. I don't know. We're gonna have to hear what you guys have to say about that. It was a really good point. So let's see. So on one hand, we had some advice saying, oh my God, I hate 4 attribute systems. It'll make me not like playing this game. Another consulting designer said, I love 4 attribute systems. I so am excited because that's the sort of game I like to play. That's an example of the sort of conflicting feedback I'm getting that I'm trying to work with right now. That's one of the challenges that we've got. This sort of reiterates this idea that whatever we do, it's not going to be perfect for everybody. We just have to make sure we write a great game for the type of game that it is, right? So we've got to remember that as well. As far as having the sub attributes go, there's a mix of interest and disinterest in that as well, coming from the same areas. Let me just take a look here. A great point about, how we have the system where you can just compare the action score to the difficulty score. And that's going to tell you whether or not they succeeded. You could do it that way without ever rolling dice. Nice comment on that, saying, that's quite clever. I really like that. At the same time, if you lead with that, if you're not leading with rolling the dice, people might be turned off by that because they like to roll dice. And I said, that's a great point. We have to make sure that we're pointing out that there's an expectation that players are rolling dice in these scenarios. However, the GM needs to know they have the ability to revert to a pure comparison type of system, right? So that's one of the things that came up. And I thought that was a really great point, because the way I had written the rules and shared it with our consulting designers, it really did sort of highlight that more than I meant to. And so they brought that up as, when we're doing the actual rules, we need to make sure about that. And I took that to heart as I was putting together our playtest document. Another comment here about, and this is really, I didn't think of it put in these words, but Heath pointed out that the game master is a player too, and so often likes to roll the dice. It's such a great point, because as a game master, I often think of myself as having a job and I'm working and I'm doing this for the team. But at the end of the day, the GM wants to have a good time too. And we do have to take that into account, right? You can't just say like, well, the game runs better, even if the GM doesn't like it. Well, then the GM's not going to run it, right? At the end of the day, if the GM doesn't like the game, they're not going to run it. And so they need to have fun running the game as well. So it's a key point to think about. Definitely a point to think about. Let me take a look here. Yeah, again, the mod hunting came up, and this was just saying like, hey, look, at the same time, you don't want to knock out the player creativity. You want to give them the opportunity to do cool stuff, right? One of the things that also came up was there were a few concerns about our chart, right? We showed like where it goes. It goes D6 and D6 plus D6 and D6 plus D8 and D6 plus D10. Unfortunately, it's not seeming as intuitive to people as it was to my own brain, right? When I first put that out there for everybody, it's not seeming as easy to memorize. And so that's one of the things that we're going to need to hear back from folks is whether we need to rethink what our dice look like. There was also the question of, you know, things like there's moments you go from D12 to 2D6. What does that matter? Now, my mathematical argument would be that with open-ended dice rolls, you have a greater chance of open-ending on 2d6 than you do on a d12. You also have a more solid roll on 2d6, where you're more likely to succeed at an average level than you are when you're on a d12, because there's going to be so swingy. But at the same time, I'm curious to see if people see that and just go like, yay, D12 to 2D6. I wish I'd been on D12, right? I don't know. I don't know how people are going to react. So we'll have to see, you know, how people react to that, because that's definitely one of the questions that came up a few times about our dice mechanics. All right, so let me pull up one of my other docs here with some more of our feedback. One of the things that came up was concern about how tough it's going to be to tell which side to add modifiers to. Do you add it to the action score? Do you add it to the difficulty score? Although I said things that make the job harder go on the difficulty score, there were some good examples of things that could potentially be like stop your game while people go like, well, is that really go on this side or is it go on that side, right? When I was writing up the playtest rules, I also ran into something with that, where I was saying to myself, well, when you're setting the base difficulty score, what you're setting it at is you're setting it at what under normal conditions, when everything is the way that it should be, how much skill do you need to have a decent chance of success? Now, what does everything as it should be mean? Well, that would mean, for example, if I'm doing surgery, it might be a basic difficulty score of 6, which is not very difficult, right? But it assumes that I have a hospital or a medical center of some kind. It assumes I have tools. It assumes I maybe have a nurse or another doctor to assist. All of those things are expected in that base difficulty score. What happens if you remove those? Well, do you add to the difficulty score with a modifier? Do you increase the base difficulty score and then add modifiers to that? It does get a little complicated for folks who need it laid out and want it laid out for them. And so I'm a little concerned that that is going to be an obstacle for some people. Now, what I'd love to see is that you don't have to worry about it too much, and because at the end of the day, the numbers come out about the same. Whether you raise the base difficulty or you add a modifier, it's going to come out about the same. But at the same time, I can see people running into a roadblock with that. Like, it's just confusing. I don't know where to add it. I don't know how much to add. Like, what happens if it's cold, but I'm wearing a snowsuit? Do I add 1 to my action score and you add 1 to the difficulty? Do you not add 1 to the difficulty because I've already got the snowsuit on, so that difficulty doesn't apply to me? I can see where this could get complicated, guys. So I'm going to need you guys to give me your feedback when we start playing this. Let me know what you run into. Is it nice and fun and free and lets you do what you want? Or does it constantly have everyone going, I don't know where to add my numbers to, and this is just frustrating and nerve-wracking? So I don't know. We're going to have to see, and that has come up as a potential point of nervousness that folks have had about this. Now, in addition to all of the feedback specific on the mechanics, I did get some very cool ideas just on ideas about like what an exceptional ability is, for example. Now we talked about this a little bit before, but there is this opportunity to have very unique, and we've talked about this in Discord a little bit, and people have brought this up. It wasn't me that first brought it up, but this idea of superpower abilities that aren't really superpowers. Things like cool under pressure, right? Maybe you'd call them feats, maybe you'd call them traits, but they effectively allow you to do something cool all the time, and it makes your character exceptional. And remember, this all goes back to our level of play where you have pretty normal people with a few exceptional abilities that let them be especially awesome at what they do. And so instead of maybe having a bunch of skills about archaeology and history and all of this stuff and navigation, maybe you just have adventurer as an ability. And that special ability allows you to do a host of things, like you can make camp, you can find your way with a map, you know how to use a compass, you know how to build a fire, all of these things. It's all bundled into one, and it's just this exceptional ability. And so that makes your character the one who carries the machete and cuts the way through the forest and says, don't touch that flower, it's poisonous, and grabs the snake before it attacks you. That's what they do. It's not a package of skills necessarily. It's a really cool special ability. So I'll be interested to see how we do this and what we do with it. Maybe this is a module. Maybe this is just a different way to play the game rather than the base mechanic. But it does sound pretty fun, really, when you start to talk about it, especially if your focus is on telling cool episodic stories as opposed to incremental character growth over time, right? Could be very, very fun. All right, so let me jump to one of my other sets of notes here. All right. Actually, I'm getting down to the end of the list of things. I have got a lot of minor details. I'm just summing things up for you guys today because I don't want to go through every single note and comment necessarily, but I just want to sort of talk through some of these things, right? Just as a note, that comment that just came up, I'm going to share this one really quick. Master the Game pointed out that it sounds in line with something you've been thinking about a while back, a descriptor that implies some talents or skills that you have. You know what's interesting about this as well? In a sense, this is what your class was in earlier versions of D&D. There was this idea that certain classes could just do certain things, right? When you start talking about climbing and thieves, right? That's a great example. That you have a certain set of skills that when that comes up, that's you. You're on it. You do it. That's your job, and you're good at it, right? It's an interesting style of play, and it's a different way of playing than the very sort of broken down, incremental, specific ability type of approach that we often see in games, especially when you start talking about big skill lists and everything like that. I like both, right? I like both. They both have a certain charm to them. And I think that there might be a way, if our base mechanic works well enough, how you handle those skills and abilities, that could be handled very simply. Like, for example, if I have a character who is an adventurer and we come to a situation where we need to try to make camp, maybe the GM says, well, it's hard to find a safe place to make camp. It's really difficult. I'm going to give it a difficulty skill of, say, a 6 or something. And then each of the players take a look. And I'm like, well, look, I'm an adventurer, man. And I'm a 3rd level adventurer. This is going to use my mind ability, which I've got a 2, not too high, but I do have a 3 as an adventurer. That gives me an action score of 5. I'm going to roll a D12. That's actually a pretty cool thing, right? Because now we're just talking about telling a story where you apply your skills and abilities on the fly in a way that you don't when things are more restricted and broken down. That sort of on the fly approach is a fun way to play. Now, what I think, though, is necessary based on my own experience with these sorts of games is it's got to be simple, right? It's got to be super, super simple to do this, because if you've got 50 things, you just stop and you stare at your 50 things and you're just frozen. You're like, I don't know which of these to use right now. But if you've got a few, like Richard Lee Byers made a really great comment about this as an idea on how you could approach it. Absolutely. Would you be able to buy additional bundles of abilities like adventure as you improve? I think that would be awesome, right? That would be a very cool way to play. And then you could also add in something we've talked about before, this idea of power stunts, right? From the old Marvel superheroes game. As an adventurer, you might have a specific awesome adventurer thing that you know, which is trap spotter or something where you apply this sort of base set of abilities in a very unique way that you're extra good at, or you can do something tricky with it that you can't otherwise do. So lots of cool things that we could do with it. And again, this could work within the base mechanic, playing the game in two different ways without breaking the system. This would allow you could play the game with either of these and keep the same set of monsters, the same set of spells. You wouldn't have to have everything replaced. You would just basically replace how you handle skills and abilities. Swap that out. You'd have two completely different games, and yet you could all be using the same source books. If someone comes out with the equipment book for Cool Name, it would work for both of those games. If someone came up with a monster book, it would work with both of those games. That's where I'm excited about what we're putting together here. So, folks, it's 8:30. I've been trying to keep these pretty short because we do them every single week, and I know people have a lot of stuff they're doing and a lot of other really great podcasts and YouTube channels and streaming video to watch and games to play, right? So I'm going to wrap things up. But the thing is that we've gotten amazing feedback. Oh, and I forgot to share the one last thing that I'm not going to go into detail. I'm just giving you a little taste here before we get started. Ta-da! That's right. I have got a core rules document. I just pulled the first few pages of it here and pulled it in. But yep, we actually have a initial playtest document in place that we're going to be sending out to you guys in the very near future. Our backers are going to get a first look at it, and then we're going to open up to a wider public so that folks can start playing the game and trying this out and figuring out, what they like, what doesn't work well, what they'd like to change, what they're missing. We're really, really looking forward to this. We're excited to be working on this with you guys, and I'm very excited to be putting something into your hands so you can start rolling some dice, because we've been doing it here and having a great time. I think you guys will have fun with it too. But that is it for tonight. I'm going to wrap things up for real now. Thank you all for watching. You guys are awesome, and I will be seeing all of you in a week. Good night.